Zoning Administrator. We really appreciate it. And let's pause for a moment of silence. All right, we're going to move on to the next item, adoption of agenda. Before we do so, I believe we've got an amendment to make. Brandon, if you would help us out, help us walk through the proposed amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to. Staff is recommending two amendments to this agenda. The first is the inclusion of a special order for the hearing. This is going to contain no new information. The hearing was already scheduled to be a public hearing, and the commission intends to allow 5 minutes of public comment for everyone to speak. This clarifies that because there is a rule in your rules of procedure that says you have to adopt a special order for these hearings. I will tell you that rule is probably a holdover from an early draft of rules that was probably borrowed by the town from the city of Asheville. My understanding is that years ago, the city of Asheville cleaned up their rules to make that no longer a requirement because it's redundant. All the information that was in the special order was essentially in your agenda that was published. So again, there's no new information here. The same amount of public comment is going to be allowed for. We are just making sure that rule was complied with. The second amendment is to amend your rules to where you don't have to go through that step in the future, again, as it's redundant. All of that information is contained in your agenda, and I know that this town is committed to giving ample opportunities for public input. I believe there are going to be 3 such opportunities at today's hearing. I can put those up on the screen if you would like to see them, and for the benefit of the public, because I don't think we have them printed out, enough copies for everyone. Okay, I was going to put it on the screen. If I can make it work. Okay. I apologize for the delay. And Josh, can we show my computer on the screen? Thank you, sir.
So Brandon, this is the first motion.
That's right.
That you
This would be the
described.
special order
Yep.
that I would recommend the commission adopting. Again, the special order notes that consistent with the published agenda and Rule 24 of your rules of procedure that mandates you adopt a special order setting forth the subject, date, place, and time of the hearing, as well as any rules and the length of time allotted to each speaker, other pertinent matters. The commission hereby adopts this special order setting forth the following. The subject is 309 Collegiate Circle, Planned Use Development Application. Today's date is the date of the hearing in this location at this time, 10:30. And the length, this clarifies that length is 5 minutes for
Right.
speaking.
And then the second amendment is the amendment to the rules, or the second amendment to the agenda is to amend the rules of procedure,
That's right.
to delete that. Yep.
Let me pull that up.
If you would pull that up, Then we'll move on to the motions we'll ask if the commission members have any questions about that. Then move on to the motion to amend the agenda, as Brandon describes. And then we will move to the motions to adopt these two motions and put them into place. Super. May I have a motion to amend the agenda as Brandon has described?
I make a motion to amend the agenda as Brandon has described and provided us in writing.
May I have a second?
Second.
Eleanor, I think, moved a little faster. Eleanor is the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The motion passes. The agenda has been amended. So now let's move on to the first motion, enacting the special order, putting that into place for this meeting. May I have a motion, and there's the description of it in the longer page. May I have a motion to put this in place?
Motion. Second.
Motion from Eleanor, second from Sally. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, the motion passes. The second item is to amend the rules of procedure to delete Rule 24 in its entirety and replace it with the text on the page regarding public hearings. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Eleanor motioned, and a second?
Second?
Second by Bill. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. All right, before we move on to the next item on the agenda around the meeting minutes, I wanted just to set the stage for everybody as we consider how to go through the new business that's outlined in the agenda. We have intentionally included plenty of times for public comment. So there is the public comment that is listed in item 4 in the agenda that precedes old business. There is also opportunity for public discussion during new business. So the item that says planned unit development, zoning request, and public hearing will allow time for public discussion. And then there is a third public comment period in item number 7. So please note, as described in the agenda, there is a 5-minute time limit per speaker. We want to make sure that there is opportunity for a diversity of comment from multiple speakers, and we simply need to be as efficient as possible. So that's the rationale for a 5-minute time limit. To the extent the chair believes that there should be additional time allotted, I am able to do so, but I would expect that we're going to ask you to adhere to a 5-minute limit. And then given the number of different opportunities in the agenda for comment, please consider avoiding repetition, making comments in one comment period, and then repeating them in another. You certainly may have additive comments. I'm not discouraging anyone from stepping up to comment more than once, but just please be considerate of the fact that a lot of people have come to this meeting, and we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to speak. All right. At this point, I think we're moving on to the adoption of meeting minutes. Are there any recommended changes to the meeting minutes?
I don't have any changes, but one suggestion. There are some things that we listed as follow-up. If in the future, if we could either highlight those or separate those, because I think they get lost in the minutes.
Okay, so your recommendation is at the end of the minutes or in one of the sections that we have some kind of a summary of the follow-ups?
Yes.
Yeah, I had the same point, and I noted there are probably 3 or 4 different things that we suggested for follow-up, but we didn't establish kind of a game plan for doing that.
Yep, that makes sense to me. So I think that's probably a comment to us and also an ask of Angie. We may need at the end of the meeting or at the end of that section, I think we as on the commission will need to specify what those follow-up items are so that we can track them and make sure we take action on them. Okay, that makes sense to me. I did have one change. I really appreciate Angie, the careful spelling of my name numerous times in the document. If you could just update it on the signature line, that would be great. I'm a little partial to that.
Well, we got rid of Clay Tucker.
Yes, exactly. And I did have one question for you, Clay. There was a comment on, it's packet page 4, noting that 98% of variance requests are for setbacks. I don't know whether you really counted 98%.
No,
Maybe numerous?
numerous, yeah, I don't know that I had a percentage.
Okay. Okay, so the changes that I'm hearing so far, at the bottom of packet page 4 in that last paragraph, to change 98% of to strike 98% of and substitute numerous, so it says noting that numerous variance requests are for setbacks, and then amending the spelling of my name on the signature line. Are there any other changes or edits? All right. May I have a motion to adopt the meeting minutes as amended?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Clay. May I have a second?
Second.
Second, Eleanor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passed unanimously. Now we will move on to our first period of public comment. Please feel free to step to the microphone, make sure it is on, state your name and address, and let us know your comments. Please go ahead.
Just so you know, I'm going to set a timer just so we can be fair to everybody. But hopefully y'all can see and self-regulate.
Thank you so much, Clay. Actually, it's just a question. Priscilla Hayner, 319 Assembly Drive. So despite your clarification, Julie, I just wanted to confirm, because you said there will be public discussion during the hearing. Is that like a normal public comment period? We'll each have 5 minutes after the presentation of the application and the staff report, then before the decision by the...
Great question. So we'll have Alexis give the staff report. Then the applicant will present their presentation. Assuming the applicant is okay with that, there may be commission members that have questions as they go, but the applicant will need to tell us how they want to run their presentation. And then there would be, we would open for public comment.
Okay, fantastic. Then that's all I wanted to confirm. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to old business. Any old business to discuss? You know, I know that there's been a lot of work on signs with the council and behind the scenes. I know that Savannah has been working on that as well. Alexis, a little bit. I know you just came back. My understanding is that's in process. So we are awaiting some work from the council to pick that up when they are able to do so. Is that a fair description? Thank you. All right, any other old business that we need to discuss? All right, moving on to new business. I want to make sure that we cover a couple of things at the start of this. But let's go ahead and start with a motion to open the hearing for the rezoning application and public hearing part of this. May I have a motion to open it?
So moved.
Bill, motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Sally. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So I want to note, as we go into this, we need to be cognizant of any potential conflicts of interest. So as an example, there may have been activities by commission members involving the Montreat stewards or the MRA, the applicant in this. Any acts of service, any financial contributions are not necessarily a conflict of interest. As you consider this legislative item, I'm going to ask Brandon to officially read out what that conflict of interest description is, and then I will pause after that and ask if anybody has a conflict of interest they need to disclose. And I just wish to note, we want to be transparent. I personally was involved with the Montreat Stewards in a communications capacity before I was on this commission. But that in itself does not necessarily represent a conflict of interest. Please go ahead.
Sure. I think that what the board needs to know is that the law prohibits commission members from voting on any zoning map or text amendment where the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact on the member. If anyone believes that this project, the result of it in either way, could have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable impact on them, they should disclose that to the commission and potentially be recused from the matter. And this would be the time to think deeply about that and make any disclosures that you may have.
All right. So if you believe you have a conflict of interest, please speak up. Otherwise, we will move on. Alexis, over to you for the staff report.
Sure. If you could bring my slides up, please, Josh. Fantastic. Good morning.
Would you bring your microphone just a little bit closer? Thank you.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, Planning and Zoning Commission, staff, and members of the public. There are several notes that I'd like to make regarding a planned unit development in Montreat before I present to you an overview of this planned unit development zoning request. In Montreat, a planned unit development, or PUD, PUD, is a rezoning or map amendment falling under the legislative hearing process. It is not a special use permit requiring a quasi-judicial hearing process as seen in neighboring jurisdictions. Per section 511.3 of the Montreat zoning ordinance, a planned unit development shall be a new zoning district that replaces the existing zoning district. The development standards and land uses in the approved PUD master plan are the zoning regulation standards and land uses for a PUD in the PUD zoning district. The official zoning map shall identify the area covered by each PUD district. Close quotes. The town decides what specific development standards apply to the PUD district. The commission should carefully consider if the development standards provided by the applicant are adequate to address new development in the requested PUD zoning district. The specific PUD zoning request is only for 309 Collegiate Circle. Next slide, please. With that said, this PUD zoning request was from Richard Dubose, applicant on behalf of property owner Mountain Retreat Association, for a planned unit development, requesting a rezoning for 309 Collegiate Circle, PIN number, if you're ready, 071096345100000 from IR zoning district to the PUD zoning district. Public notice was mailed to the property owners within 250 feet of the subject property on July 1st, 2026. Signs were posted and notice was placed in the Black Mountain News on July 2nd and July 9th. The town clerk posted notice on the town's website and an email newsletter in the Montreat Post Office and on the Town Hall Community Bulletin Board. Although not a requirement for the PUD request, the applicant held public meetings with the community and neighbors on April 9th and May 5th. Next slide, please. The subject property is currently zoned IR, institutional/residential zoning district. The zoning district surrounding the subject property as followed, and this is roughly cardinal directions. North is WL, Woodland District. South is I, Institutional and WL, Woodlands District. East and west is IR, Institutional Residential District. Next slide, please. The master plan shows 6 buildings. The applicant proposes multiple principal buildings on this lot. This includes 3 existing buildings in gray: Walnut Lodge, Hickory Lodge, and Reynolds Lodge. A commercial 24-room lodge in blue for Phase 1, and 2 8-bedroom cottages in purple. Next slide, please. And these are the proposed development standards. The applicant proposes multiple principal buildings and the following by right uses in their proposed design standards: public and institutional conference center, commercial hotel, lodge, single-family dwelling, 2-family dwelling, multi-unit dwelling, family care homes, accessory buildings or uses, home occupation, studios, private swimming pools, auditorium, college, educational facility, library, public library, municipal government facilities, and public museums. Per section 511.32 of the Montreat zoning ordinance, all uses that are set out in the approved PUD master plan shall be treated as a permitted use within the district. Next slide, please. Here's some more proposed development standards. Similarly to the existing IR district, the setbacks are 25 feet front and rear, 12 feet sides. The density is combined residential bedrooms and non-residential guest rooms not to exceed 70 rooms or 140 beds. The form of the total building area is capped at 80% of what is permitted under the IR zoning district. Parking requirements: 1 standard space per 1,000 square feet. Total number of required standard spaces may be met through installation of compact car spaces. Next slide, please. Building height. Maximum building height is 40 feet, measured from the average natural grade at the footprint of each principal building. All proposed buildings, other than single family, must be approved by authority having jurisdiction for fire code enforcement. Structures over 35 feet in height will require special fire protection systems. Building separation. Separation between buildings shall not be required except as may be required by the building code and/or fire code. Next slide. Open space shall be a minimum of 20% of the total lot area, reducing the buildable area to 80%. There was also a note that says refer to the PUD district master plan for the proposed amount of open space. No revisions, alternatives, and/or clarifications to the town's adopted plans for greenways will be in this. Recreation space and open space are provided. No conservation and/or preservation areas are provided. No public recreation areas are provided. Management and long-term maintenance of open space will be conducted by a private entity, the Mountain Retreat Association. Next slide, please. All right. Landscaping, except as shown in the PUD master plan, will fall under Article 9 of the Montreat zoning ordinance, which says no less than 5% of the lot or parcel, which is the subject of the required landscape plan, shall be landscaped. This requirement may be met with both existing and new plants and trees. The requirement shall be met in addition to any area required for screening, provided that the total area of the site devoted to landscaping shall not be required to exceed 40% of the site. Landscaping required for off-street parking and loading areas must be, and loading areas over 2,500 square feet. Every effort must be to retain existing flora, and that is in section 904. And as a note, Article 9, landscaping applies to all land zone institutional/residential, and any proposed plan unit development. Okay. Next slide, please. Proposed development standards for screening and signs. The applicant proposes that development standards for screening and sign regulations will comply with section 504.12 and 504.13 of the Montreat zoning ordinance. Screening regulations require unlike and dissimilar uses abutting each other in the same or different districts to include a 6-foot-high closed fence or evergreen vegetation of sufficient density to serve the purpose of a solid fence. Next slide, please. And of course, as you know, because this is a map amendment or rezoning, you do have a consistency statement that you do approve at the end. So according to page 54 of Montreat Tomorrow, Town of Montreat Comprehensive Plan, the following objectives may apply to this project. Preserve, protect, and enhance the character of Montreat by evaluation and improving existing allowable uses, densities, and dimensional regulations in each zoning district. Investigate development regulations per zoning district for short-term rentals with consideration for existing short-term rentals and potential funding sources. In the spirit of the long-term success of the Town of Montreat, work collaboratively with the institutions of the town, including, but not limited to, Montreat College and the Mountain Retreat Association on any future development to support the vitality and future of the institutions and the town. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation. At the pleasure of the commission, you may call the representative for the applicant for their presentation. I can stand by for any questions if necessary. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alexis. Does the commission have any questions at this time? All right, then we are ready for the applicant to come forward and speak.
All right, this is Richard DuBose calling in remotely. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Well, I apologize for not being there in person this morning. Can't be in two places at once. I want to start by thanking the members of the commission. I want to thank you for your time and care you're giving the application. We do appreciate your willingness to review our proposal, which we think is important not only for the conference center, but for all the ways the conference center supports our shared community. I want to thank, in particular, our town staff. They have been incredibly professional and thorough in explaining the requirements of the plan unit development application. Their assistance has helped to ensure that our submission is complete. I also, in particular, want to thank Josh for making it technically possible for me to speak to you this morning. Josh, always appreciate you. In addition to me, our team today includes Chuck Kreckelberg, who is the Senior Project Manager with Altura Architects and is our primary technical advisor on the application. Also there, I believe, is Tanner Pickett, who's our Vice President for Communications. We, the three of us, represent the MRA Board, who concluded after considerable reflection that the application before you, what we have sometimes come to refer to as Option 2 or the Cottage Plan, you may hear both of those terms in our presentations this morning. We feel that the PUD application represents an opportunity to improve upon our previously approved plan in another part of the town's work, while also responding to the community and our neighbors and some of their input. Notably, the board has made this choice even though we still possess a valid permit to develop the property along the lines of the original plan, but the board believes that the plan before you does a better job of preserving the lodge's original purposes and also is a better fit for its surroundings. At its heart, this is a project to serve the conference center's mission, of course, which includes welcoming and serving thousands each year, not only folks from around the larger church, but folks from around our community for worship and learning and renewal and recreation and arts programs. And to continue that service, we need to modernize our lodging. We chose this site because it has served conference guests for decades. The basis of the proposal before you this morning is a simple one. The PUD intentionally would blend institutional and residential structures. A smaller lodge would front Assembly Drive, and above it, 2 residential-style cottage buildings are proposed that have been designed to reflect the scale and character of nearby homes on Georgia Terrace. It's an arrangement that provides a compatible transition between the Conference Center campus and the surrounding neighborhood. We also chose the PUD process because it would settle the question of the long-term use of this property and to look at the entire site as an integrated whole. According to the code, PUDs offer the opportunity for flexibility and innovative design that may not otherwise be permitted, and we feel like this is that kind of project. As you know, hotels and lodges are not permitted by right on this property, even though hotels and lodges have been the historic use of the property for decades. And we feel the PUD is the most appropriate approval process to clarify and finalize the use of the property for its historic and its intended use. And the flexibility the PUD would grant us would come with strict limitations on the development of the property, as Alexis has reviewed, and these are limitations that we think are reasonable. A couple of additional points. One, I want you to be cognizant of the fact that our application draws on several important sources, including some of the ones Alexis has already mentioned, principally the existing MZO, as well as design principles and objectives that were embodied in our previously approved project. We also carefully considered the town's comprehensive plan, not only the 2023 update, but the foundational plan of 2008. We reviewed the village plan as well, the one that was proposed by neighbors in 2022 for the property, and we've incorporated some of their ideas into our proposal as well. The last point is this: for us to get to this point, it was important for the board to gauge the community's opinions about the plan. So on April 9th, we invited the community to a public meeting to introduce it, and since then we have continued to meet with members of the community on several fronts. And while we acknowledge that no proposal can satisfy every single concern, we do believe the community's general reaction left us convinced that the Option 2 cottage plan, this PUD application, is the strongly preferred approach by our community. So even though we continue to hold a special use permit to build the original plan, we've accepted the community's judgment that Option 2 represents the better path forward. With that, I will turn it over to Chuck Kreckelberg to walk you through the specifics of the proposal.
I am not Chuck. I'm Tanner Pickett. I'll be dipping in and out, but I just, Madam Chair, you asked about questions throughout the presentation, and Chuck is more than willing to take whatever questions as we go along. So you can wait till the end, or you can stop him and ask, and he's really good on his feet. So
Thank you.
Hello. As Richard said, my name is Chuck Kreckelberg. I'm a senior project manager with Altura Architects based in Asheville. We've been working with the MRA for several years and are really excited to have this opportunity to talk about the PUD. I have a few prepared remarks, and then I'd like to walk through the application just so you fully understand everything that's in the application. And then we also have some additional images that were presented to the community on the 9th of April, as Richard mentioned. It's important to note that, and I'll make this clear at that time, those renderings of the proposed buildings are not part of this zoning application. They were presented to the community, and we wanted to also present them in this setting, just to be clear that this is MRA's intention. However, because this is a question of zoning, they're not included with the actual application. So I'll walk through that, and then we can open it up to discussions. I did hear that you may have questions as I'm presenting. I'm fine pausing and moving on. Let me just make some initial remarks. This is reinforcing what Richard said in a slightly different way. The first item is that MRA and Altura Architects have been working closely with town staff to complete this planned unit development application. And we are very grateful to the staff for their assistance in that. While several of the IR district's requirements are referenced by the PUD's development standards, the following items differ from the IR district. And so what we want to say with these 7 points that Alexis has already gone through, I'm putting it in the context of the foundation of our development standards are the Montreat zoning ordinance and the IR district. Given the fact that we have multiple buildings, several of these 7 differences from the IR district, I'm going to bring up one more time. Number 1, we're asking for multiple principal buildings to be permitted on the parcel. Outside of the I district, which does allow multiple principal buildings, all other districts are limited in having a single principal building, and we are requesting multiple, given the way that this site is configured and, as Richard noted, has worked over the years. All off-street parking is governed by 702.4. That was a choice on our part, and there may be some discussion around that topic. There are different ways that parking can be calculated, but we felt that the most appropriate way and the clearest way to calculate parking was 1 standard space is required per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. Given the nature of the PUD, the lodge, that blue building, may be constructed first. The cottages may be constructed at a point in the future. What we're looking for with the zoning is flexibility to provide the number of parking spaces that are required at that time and moving into the future for the next 10, 100 years. Really creating a clear zoning language that allows for flexibility. And that's a big word that you'll see in the PUD definition is flexibility. Number 3, lodge hotel. So lodge falls under hotel. MRA has and Altura both believe that a lodge is slightly different from a hotel, especially when you look at how MRA defines lodge. But under the MZO, a lodge is a hotel, and so we're asking for not only hotels, but conference center to be permitted uses on this parcel. So that's the 3rd item that differs from the IR district. Combined residential bedrooms and non-residential guest rooms shall not exceed 70. So this is, if MRA is asking for this permitted use of hotel and conference center on the parcel, what is MRA giving back? What is the, for the added flexibility, what limits is MRA putting on the table? Limit number 1 is this idea of 70 beds. Where did that come from? That came from the previous plan that was reviewed by and approved by the Board of Adjustment. We're building on that and saying no more than that number, even though more could be permitted on a IR parcel. And so if this were left as, or within the institutional district, if a hotel were on this parcel, you could have more than 70 rooms, but we're limiting the total number of rooms. And this is Walnut, Hickory, Reynolds, the 2 cottages, this new proposed lodge facing Assembly Drive. The total is 70. Open space shall be a minimum of 20%. This is a big part of the PUD. You'll see a lot of references in the PUD language to creative site design. And this idea, so the 5% landscaping idea, that's the minimum that's required. What we're saying is an additional parameter, an additional development standard, is this idea that 20% must be open. Not necessarily green, we'll have, a fire pit and a patio, but that is part of the open space. Number 6, this one gets a little bit technical, but when you have a single building on a parcel, The building height is calculated by determining the average grade, so the average elevation. So if you've got 1,000 feet at the bottom of your site and 2,000 feet at the top of your site, the average natural grade would be 1,500 feet. And you go up from there. With multiple buildings on the site, we have changed the language to the following. With multiple principal buildings, maximum building height is 40 feet measured from the average natural grade at the footprint of each principal building. And if you think about it this way, if you have one building down the hill and one building up the hill, we want to look at the natural grade of the section of the terrain associated with the building. If we were to go with the entire terrain, we would have a very tall building, in this case, on Assembly Drive, and we would have a very short building on Georgia Terrace. And we don't think that that's in keeping with the Montreat zoning ordinance intent. Number 7, separation between buildings shall not be required, except as may be required by the building code and/or fire code. This is just saying we want to be able to place buildings on the site as is safe to do. And the distance between Hickory and Reynolds, for example, really necessitates this. As buildings get closer together, the fire code and the building code have different requirements for those buildings. And so we could connect all the buildings. We're not going to do that. The idea here is having the ability to place buildings within the setbacks as we see fit. That said, the only building that can happen on the site is what is shown in the PUD master plan. And I think this is a very important concept, that even though this is zoning language, Alexis gave us the list of the various uses, and I do want to make clear that that list of uses, was it private swimming pools? All of those uses exist within the IR district. So those are fundamental uses. What we're doing is we're adding to the IR district hotel and conference center. All of those other districts, the MRA does not show them on the PUD master plan, and so that means they're not being included, but they are permitted uses within this new PUD zoning district. The last item that I just wanted to give for context is compared to the version of the plan approved by the Board of Adjustment on May 24th, 2022, several years ago. This version of this parcel and the configuration of its buildings is different from that plan in the following ways. The lodge is smaller. We had an L-shaped lodge that was much larger. The lodge has 24 guest rooms in lieu of 40. 2 8-bedroom cottages face Georgia Terrace in lieu of the north wing of the hotel, that large L-shaped building. The combined footprint of buildings is reduced. So by building cottages, we've actually taken some of the hotel footprint and we've reduced it because we now have smaller footprints at the 3-story cottages. That means more open space. The next item is open space has been increased. The lodge is 10 feet shorter. So when you look at the lodge from Assembly Drive, it is 10 feet shorter. The lodge is 10 feet farther west, a total of 30.5 feet from the east property line. So you may remember that with the previous version of the lodge, there was a long facade along the east property line, and it was only 20.5 feet. Still greater than the side yard setback, but we've moved the building 10 additional feet away from that east property line. Configuration of buildings embraces aspects of the village concept. This is a concept that was shared with MRA, and over the years we've really, I'd say, understood or started to understand that concept and the benefits for this site, for Montreat, and for this project. Not all of those concepts were incorporated, but many of them were. The smaller scale of buildings is more residential in appearance. That's a definite follow-on effect from the village concept and the two cottages. Outdoor gathering space is located between the lodge and the cottages. With the L-shaped lodge, that gathering space was a little more exposed, a little more oriented toward Georgia Terrace. So you can imagine people gathering outside the lodge, the previous version of the lodge. Now what we have is the cottages actually create a kind of courtyard space in between the lodge building and the cottage buildings. The lodge driveway is 10 feet farther west from the east property line. So we've moved the driveway further west away from that east neighboring property line. The garage entrance is 10 feet further west from the property line. Lodge mechanical units. So the mechanical units previously were located underneath that upper wing of the lodge that went toward Georgia Terrace. And there were louvers oriented toward the east property line. What we now have is lodge mechanical units located under the front porch. They will be concealed behind louvers. Airflow will pass through the garage, through those mechanical units, out the louvers, and there will be a vegetated landscaped area in front of that area. Cottage mechanical units will be located between the two cottages, sunken 10 feet below the main level. There's a good bit of grade change from Georgia Terrace, slightly down the hill, and so we'll be able to put those units in between the two buildings. The final point is cottages have front porches oriented toward Georgia Terrace. This was a really important idea of basically maintaining that Montreat quality that comes from having three buildings, in this case, three new construction buildings, each with a front porch oriented to the primary street. Go ahead.
Yeah, Josh, can you bring up those conceptual drawings, please? Thank you.
This is not in your packet. This is the view from Georgia Terrace looking at the two cottages. And I'm just going to quickly go through these. You can see the porches. This is the elevation. You can go to the next one, Josh. This is a hand-rendered view of the cottage with the elevation. Even though it's a three-story building, it would only be 3 stories facing the inner portion of the lot. It's a 2-story cottage facing Georgia Terrace. Next. This is the 3-story portion that faces that 24 guest room lodge, creating that courtyard between the two buildings. Next, please. This is a front view. You can see over on the right side, we've got our driveway. What is important is that the building, again, has been shortened to 10 feet. And by doing so, we've been able to move the building 10 feet, that side of the building, the right side of this view, away from the property line. It's important to note that the left side of the building, the west side of the building, is exactly where it was with that previous plan.
Are the louvers?
Yes.
That's
you can
where
see,
the mechanical
yes,
is.
Down there, that's exactly, yes, that's where the mechanical is. And we're getting enough airflow because the ventilation of the garage in a active way, so it's not a passive system, will actively be slowly moving the air through the garage to get fresh air in the garage and then pushing it over these mechanical units so that the condensing units can do their job.
And the
garage?
Okay, so the garage, do you see the car there on the right side? Mm-hmm. And the garage door is in the process of being opened in that view. That is the garage door that leads to the parking spaces below the building.
Is that the only entrance into the garage?
That is the only entrance into the garage. There is a stair on the left side that provides egress within the building. So if you're in the garage, you can either go out. There's a person door near the garage door. You don't see it in this view. But you can either exit to the right or to the left, to the east or to the west.
How many spaces are in the garage?
That, I believe, were required with the zoning requirement because the building itself, the gross floor area is 21,000 square feet. we'll have a minimum of 21 spaces. It's hard to say exactly how many, there will be at least 21. We think we have enough space for potentially up to 26 or 27. But we need a maintenance space, we may need a space for mechanical staging, et cetera.
Will vans and larger vehicles fit in there?
Yes, yes.
Since you no longer have the L-shape building, and I can't remember, there was going to be a lot of blasting to put this parking in. Is that no longer the case since we're not doing the L-shape, or is that still going to be a problem? I mean,
So we have done geotechnical test pits where instead of the auger borings, they actually used a track hoe and dug pits. And in those various locations, we hit rock in the 12 to 13 feet. What we understand during this process over the last several years, we had considered geothermal heating and cooling, which would have been fabulous.
Right.
And so we were required to drill, and so in the Reynolds parking lot, we drilled a 500-foot well that told us that the bedrock that we thought we had hit was actually boulders. Because when they drilled this little, 500-foot test, and then subsequently filled, it was completely filled, they would hit a boulder, and then they would hit rock, and then they would hit a boulder, and then they would hit soil, and then they would, and so if you think of this cove, you've got solid rock somewhere deep down below this property. But immediately, at least within the first several hundred feet, you have a mixture of rock and dirt, mostly dirt. So when excavation of the garage, which is, it's a rectangle underneath the building, when that happens, there may be boulders that can easily be lifted and removed, but there may be boulders that we need to, there's a lot of methods, and MRA has been very clear that blasting would be the very last option to be considered, and would, in consultation with the neighbors, require some real thought. There are very specific protocols with that type of removal.
how far down do you have to dig to
So-
accommodate these
So we
parking?
think we're going to be about, because you have to go down a little further to pour the concrete and the footings. We think we're going to be in that 13-foot range. So it's possible that we could miss everything. It's possible that if there's a stone that's sticking out of the middle, first they'll dig the perimeter, and then everyone will be able to see what's there. Then the question is, there are methods where the rock can be drilled and expanding foam can break up the rock without the vibration that comes from blasting. There's a lot of methods for removing the rock. We know that vibration is a major concern.
13, you're thinking about 13 feet.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Because what we're building, unlike the previous lodge, which was a more commercial building, this building's going to be built like a house. The foundation walls are concrete block. The building is wood. There is some steel because the spans are very long in the basement, but homes that Altura designs incorporate steel in addition to wood. But this is primarily a wood building on concrete masonry foundations, where we're going a depth of about 12 to 13 feet for the basement.
I had a couple of questions for clarification. First, on the change in the definition for how building height is measured.
Yes,
I
yes.
totally understand your explanation of kind of why that request is being made. From a practical standpoint, just from a line of sight standpoint of someone standing down at Assembly Drive or at other points around the property, what is the practical implication if in fact these plans move forward in terms of how building height might be from an observational standpoint, people walking or driving by the property?
That is a great question. Given the this average grade,
Yeah.
going to the ridge, one thing that you're going to notice is part of what reduces the height of our building is the fact that we have on all four sides, now, except for the gable, but all four sides, we've got a hipped roof. So the ridge of the roof, unlike a building like Freeland Hall, for example, where the height of the building is at the facade. Here we've pushed the ridge back, and we don't even have a gable, we have a hipped roof. At this corner, where you see the garage, where the building is 3 stories, nobody, Altura, MRA, neighbors, you all, nobody, we don't want the building to be this tall, but we have to put parking under the building. And so we're peeling, we're excavating down so that we can get into the garage. At that point, that height is it all the way up to the ridge. Perceived, I don't know, and I can get you that number. The measurement, and again, the bottom of the garage door that you can see there. And this is something that we looked into specifically to make sure that the 40 feet that's allowed in the IR district will work for us, and it completely does. Our building, based on the average grade, is 39.5 feet. And so we're not adding any additional height to the IR district. We're keeping the IR district height as is. So the height relative to that average point, which is somewhere floating in, so if you were to go inside the garage, that point would be floating here, because there's the uphill portion
Right.
and the downhill, so it's this average, and then you go up 40 feet from there. So our calculation is that that's 39.5 feet.
Okay.
The perceived height from that bottom corner to the very top of the ridge, I'm not sure what that height is, but it may be actually more than 40 feet. But on the uphill side of the house, it's much less. I'm sorry, on the uphill side of the lodge, it's much less. And so, a little bit wonky answer. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Conceptually, that's helpful. Back on the parking, basically, you're asking as part of this to accept 702.4,
Yes.
I believe, as kind of the basket, multi-use basket for how parking is going to be calculated. When I looked at 702.1, 2, and 3, those lay out specific parking requirements for, each different use, and you could identify those uses in different pieces of the site plan. And so maybe this is a question for Alexis and Brandon as well, but or as part of this, I mean, it's not clear in the ordinance itself whether 702.4 was intended to just apply to categories that didn't fit into 702.1, 2, and 3, or whether it was intended to be used as you're using it as a basket for a lot that has multi-uses on it. So are we being asked to kind of accept and approve that, just specific to this PUD application, but
Yes.
not outside of this?
That's correct.
Okay.
And if I could add some context, the reasoning is if we don't go that route, Altura, MRA, our team would then default back to what was agreed with the town as part of the Board of Adjustment process. Much more complicated calculation, which is you have to look at the net increase. So you have to understand how many parking spaces are there based on the number of rooms, what's being subtracted, what number of net rooms is being increased, and then the parking in those 4 categories gets applied to that existing calculation. And so with the 70 rooms of the Board of Adjustment approved plan, with those 70 guest rooms on the site, when you do that net increase calculation, the approved number of parking spaces was 62. I don't think a lot of people in that portion of the discussion really I think the Board of Adjustment did understand. They understood, okay, right, you have existing parking, there's this net calculation. But it was more confusing, I think, than helpful, because ultimately, MRA, with that original version of the plan, was saying, on this site, we don't need more than 62 parking spaces. Why would we give up green space? You know, why would, it's plenty, 62 is plenty of parking, especially since, as lodges, people are coming to these spaces in vans, multiple people in cars. The ordinance itself, at the time of that process, was giving us too many parking spaces. And so we used the language within the MZO that allowed for this net calculation, and that got us to the 62. With the planned unit development, what we realized was we needed a way that just got rid of this net calculation and subtracting this and adding this, and just said, let's have it be a function based on the MZO language, which we do think is very logical. This idea that if you have 1,000 square feet of building, give me a parking space. So let's look at I'm just going to give you one quick example. If you look at the cottages, which are residential homes, 2 parking spaces for the first 2,500 square feet. 1 space for every additional 1,000. These are 5,000 square foot buildings. You would need 5 parking spaces. You divide 5,000 by 1,000, you get 5 parking spaces. So we feel that we're not trying to get around anything.
I appreciate that.
But we are trying to build in this idea of flexibility where as a PUD, not as another form of zoning, but as a PUD, how do we build in the flexibility so that in phase 2, when the cottages are constructed, that the parking and the building and the site, they're all working together in a way that isn't as convoluted as the net calculation.
Okay, understood, thank you.
I think one thing that's confusing me is you're taking into account your 3 other buildings when you account for parking. I don't know how many parking spaces they already have. You mentioned 21 or 26 under the main lodge.
Correct.
5 each for the other. At some point, it would be helpful to get a breakdown as to where the different parking is and identified on the map.
Yeah, it is.
With numbers, I don't remember seeing any numbers, but I can go back and look. The other thing is, under your proposal, is there a maximum that's set for parking spaces? Or are you saying that there's a minimum that you would have 62? But, you know, what I'm worried about, you know, I'm trying to look down the road is, you know, somebody in 10 or 15 years coming in and saying, oh, we want to add 20 more spaces or something like that. So do you have, in your proposal, is there a set limit for the maximum number of parking spaces?
That's why we're deferring back to the MZO language. And those minimum, and if there's a maximum, it would defer back to the MZO language. We're directing people to which of those 4 categories the calculation is made.
So is there a maximum in your proposal, in the PUD proposal?
The PUD master plan shows the parking spaces that we will be providing based on the square footage.
So it's a minimum of 21 for the lodge and 5 each for the cottages?
Correct.
So 31
Correct.
for 70 beds.
Plus the other buildings and their parking spaces. And so what is shown on the parcel conforms to that language within the MZO.
And the existing lodges we're talking about, those spots are already there. So
Right.
those aren't additional spots for
Right.
those lodges. Is it helpful to talk about, you know, what we're showing is what we want to put in? Like he's talking about what's,
Yes,
if somebody in
yes.
20 years wanted to put a bunch more spots, like what that
Yes.
looks like.
Well, before you go on, I just wanted to note, we're going to take a break. So everybody knows we're going to take a break at 11:50. That clock is not accurate. So please, so please be aware, we're going to take a break at 11:50 for 20 minutes, so everybody can just plan for that. We'll keep the hearing open, right? We won't close it, we'll just take a break. So please just consider that as we continue.
Madam Chair, may I make one comment about the site plan and the impact that it has in your decision on a planned use development? The applicant, when they submit that site plan, they are saying to the board, we want to build this project as depicted in the site plan. So when you see the parking that's shown on the site plan, I believe that's what the applicant is telling you. The parking is shown on the site plan. Your ordinance says that if there's a future amendment to that, if someone wanted to make changes to that parking, they would need to come back to this board and seek that amendment.
With a new plan.
That's right.
Yes, showing that new parking configuration, to your point.
That's right, and that's, I believe the language is a substantial change in the site plan. I can pull it up, but.
So I mean, perhaps that's part of my question. The site plan shows existing buildings on it.
Mm-hmm.
If you change those existing buildings, you would need to come back?
That's our understanding.
That's my understanding as well. Yes, ma'am.
So the retention of the rights, I can't remember exactly the terminology. Uses by right. Yeah, so the retention of the permitted uses by right of the IR district would effectively, you still wouldn't be able to put in a swimming pool because it's
Correct.
not on the plan.
That's correct.
And Richard may want to speak to this as well, so I just want to, he's still on, so if he wanted to say something, I want to make sure he had an opportunity to this specific item.
No, Chuck did a good job.
Okay.
So if you're not allowed to add a swimming pool because it's not on the site plan, why are you asking for one now?
We're asking for, as the foundation, we want from a property value vantage point. So I've done multiple planned unit developments in other municipalities. From property value vantage point, if you and the town commissioners were to say, well, we only see cottages and lodges, get rid of the other uses, it would significantly devalue the property. Ultimately, we would like to have a hotel in the IR district. That's really what this is about.
That actually brings up two questions. One, when you're saying devalue, you're saying if you were to sell the property to someone else, I mean, that's not exactly relevant in Montreat.
Not at
It would
all.
be in Asheville.
That's correct.
The other thing I wanted to go back to is you said you have a very different interpretation of lodge versus hotel.
Correct.
Could you explain that, please? How do you see the difference between a lodge and a hotel?
That's something that, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
This is something that I can speak to. Predominantly, Clay, we don't use our lodging facilities the way one typically thinks of as a hotel. We host groups more often than we host individuals. We do host individuals, but they tend to be one-offs or individuals that are coming as parts of groups for group conferences, retreats, and so on and so forth. And so we typically rent lodges to groups, even in Assembly Inn, where, we will occasionally host an individual who comes in and needs a place to stay one evening. We're not opening Assembly Inn just because that individual needs a place to stay. That our Assembly Inn is used predominantly for groups and group lodging, and so that's probably the most fundamental difference. The other things, of course, relate to specific use. We don't market to tourists. We don't compete with Hampton Inn. In many ways, we're just fundamentally different than how a facility like that operates.
The other thing too is like generally staffing. I suspect many people haven't stayed in our lodges specifically that we have existing, but usually so there's not a front desk person that's there. Like if you rent this with your family, you get the key, you go there, you do your thing, and then you check out. Kind of a situation, which is different than Hampton Inn or something where, there's people coming and going, there's a person there who's staffing it all the time, that type of situation. So that's how we think about those distinctions.
Is there any documentation to that you can point to in your PUD saying how it would be operated? Because I understand it's not a commercial hotel, and, it's going to be, you're going to limit the guests and, advertising or other things like that. Is there a way, do you have anything in your regulations, or is there something that could be added to the PUD as how these lodges are operated and they're not operated under commercial fashion?
Well, I don't know that we have anything in the particular application. It is fundamental to our status as a integrated auxiliary of the church and as a 501c3 organization. We have specific, I say specific, there's some gray area, frankly, around the law around this. But generally speaking, we have lots of external guardrails around how we would use this facility based on the nature of the organization that we are.
So applying that to, I just wanted to clarify, applying what you've just said to what Chuck said just a minute ago, that ideally you'd like to have a hotel in the IR district. Is that what I understood that you said? What does that mean exactly?
Thank you. That is not what I meant.
Okay.
Lodge, thank you. Thank you for that.
It is what you said.
It is what I said, so I'm going to take it back.
But I also think I think you were saying in the sense that there's not a delineation in the MZO between those two things. That's why he was using that specific language.
We have to use, technically, our goal was to have lodge in the PUD.
Right.
And from a technical staff vantage point, we have to call it a hotel. So that is what the MZO calls it. Lodge is not defined.
Yeah.
But it is defined as a type of hotel. And
Right.
so that's the word that I was using. The use hotel and the use conference center per the MZO is what we're asking for on this particular parcel.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because I know what you're asking for approval for here, but I just wanted to understand whether there's some other, longer-term game plan that's a very different direction than what you're asking approval
No.
for here, and it sounds like there's not.
And Richard, can you speak to that?
I'm sorry, we had a siren going back. Can you repeat the question?
Is there some long-range plan to have a hotel, not a lodge, but a hotel on the parcel?
No.
Thank you.
No, there's not a short-range plan, there's not a mid-range plan, there's not a long-range plan.
I have a question, though. So if we include that designation of a hotel, and God forbid, MRA goes broke, and this piece of property gets sold, would it then be able to be bought by a hotel and a commercial hotel be put in there by designating it this way?
Yeah,
Yes. Okay.
That's why I was asking, is
Yeah.
there something in your regulations or something to put in the PUD that would delineate that difference?
Can I speak to that
Yeah.
quickly?
Yep.
So one of the things that Montreat struggles with, I think sometimes, is understanding the opportunity for commercial use up in its valley relative to the reality of the market. No hotel would build the facility, no hotel company, in my estimation, would build the facility we're proposing to you. We're talking about a substantial size structure with only 24 rooms, with substantial meeting space, substantial overhead, underground parking. It certainly could be a project that could be taken over by a commercial entity. I'm not disputing that. But the fact of the matter is, if, for example, the MRA went broke, to walk down that sort of doomsday scenario that was proposed, the other uses would be far more likely to be developed. If someone acquired this property for purely commercial interests, multifamily housing would be a much more attractive development of the property than the use we're proposing. Now, of course, they'd have to remove what we're proposing. And I would submit to you all that the project that we are proposing on several levels both helps reduce the opportunity for those alternate uses to be in our future, but also increases the opportunity for the conference center to retain, sustain, and enhance its ministry.
But if we follow that scenario, the buyer would need to submit a planned unit development update. I'm looking at Brandon, correct? In order to redevelop the parcel to put a hotel on it.
That's my understanding.
That's correct.
Okay.
If what they were doing made a substantial change to this plan, they would have to come back and get an amendment.
But it would still be allowable since we allowed it to be a hotel. So, I mean, if that's
Well-
if we're putting that designation in a PUD, then it's allowable.
If someone bought the property, they would be able to execute this plan as it's described here.
Okay, that's
If they
it.
wanted to make any any changes to it, they would have to come to this board for approval. And the board is not bound to grant anything.
Beyond this.
That's right. You are not,
Okay.
what you are doing today, regardless of the decision to make, you are not making any promises about what you'll do in the future.
This,
I want to be very careful with how I say
yeah,
that, but
that goes back to those.
So if I could speak that real quick, again, the same thing applies. If someone wanted to put a swimming pool in there, they would have to do the same thing that he's talking about for that. They have to come back to this board and say, now we want to put a swimming pool, which I can, from the MRA perspective, dealing with the one we've got is enough, right? But I'm just saying that to think about that in the same way, all those things that are listed are what is currently allowable by right. So that's not what we're proposing. We're not saying give us the opportunity to do all of these things. What we're trying to say is what you've seen on that piece of paper, the blue and the purple, is what we are proposing to do. And if Chuck decided he wanted to put a big swimming pool in there in 5 years, we'd have to come back and go through this process to get that amended and added to that. So this is not a carte blanche, you can build anything you want.
Yep.
So just for clarity from that perspective.
Does
that help?
Yeah, does the IR designation include all those things currently?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
listed,
Yeah.
because that's what's currently allowable by right.
So we're just transferring that over to the.
Well, we're not just transferring it. So we could
Gonna ask you
currently,
1 minute.
okay,
Yep, and we'll
Just 1
we'll
minute.
go to break, and then we can continue.
what we can currently do use by right is build a 114,000 square foot multifamily development on that property.
Right.
At a minimum, this PUD says you can't build 114,000 square feet of multifamily. It would be 80% of that. There's also a limit on the number of rooms, which might limit that further. What we're talking about here is a very limited, well, not very, but a limited, what we feel is balanced approach to two uses have been added, and these limitations are the counterbalance to that adding of these uses. And to the point of, could a larger hotel be constructed on the parcel? The answer is, I don't think the answer is yes, because it would have to go through this process.
Let's-
So it's not a
let's-
definitive yes.
Yeah, I think we're going to have some more questions on that.
Yes.
So let's pick it up with, I definitely have some more questions. Don't want to speak for Eleanor, but I want to make sure we're really crisp on that.
Great.
So we're going to pause for a break. It's 11:51, and we'll pick it back up at 12:10.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello? All right, let's go ahead and start gathering back for the meeting, please. We're going to start again. Let's get just a minute to finish up, please. I know, I'm glad I'm wearing my sweater. Yep. We have to make a motion first. Yeah. All right, asking our audience members to take their seats, please. Community members, take your seats. Commission members, town attorney and Alexis, please make sure your microphones are back on. The on button pulled towards you. All right, we are moving off a break back into the meeting. A couple of things. Please make sure, as our interested community members are sitting, please make sure that you just keep the side conversations to a minimum. Feel free to step out if you need to have a conversation. And we need to make sure that the microphones can accurately capture the discussion. Thank you. All right. I'd like to note that Alan Crawford had to step away. So I would appreciate a couple of motions in order to ensure that Gail can, our alternate member, can step up and join us. The first motion would be to excuse Alan Crawford from the meeting.
Motion?
Second.
I heard a motion from Sally in 3 seconds. Who's the second? Mike is the second. Thank you for that. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? Okay, that passes unanimously. The second motion is to ask Gail Sawyer, who has been present for the entire discussion, to step forward as our alternate member and take that place as a voting member on the committee. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion from Eleanor. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Bill. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? All right, unanimous approval. Thank you, Gail, for stepping forward on this. Let's give Gail a second to step up. And then on your mic.
A little bit more enthusiastic.
You thought you were getting out of this.
Madam Chair, while she's getting situated, you may want to ask if she heard the conflict statement when it was read earlier and if she has any conflicts to disclose.
Gail, as you're getting organized, make sure your microphone is on. Do you have any questions about the conflict of interest? Did you hear it?
I did hear it, Madam Chair, and I do not.
Thank you. All right, we are rolling back into session. Where we left it is there was a lot of discussion around the plan, and I'm looking at packet page 20, which I think is technically part of the plan. And then there's also the section in the request, which is on packet page 21. There is discussion about the Montreat Lodge PUD district shall provide. So there's a series of bullets that you've been discussing. And page 22, the permitted uses by right of the IR district. So that, it's a little confusing because it seems like the retention of all of those rights by use, I understand, and Richard has described why you're requesting that, but none of those, those potential uses are reflected on the plan. So I'm asking for affirmation that retention of those permitted uses not being represented on the plan means they can't be executed on without amending the plan.
Correct.
That's our understanding.
And Brandon, that's your understanding, and Alexis as well.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Yes.
And just to kind of add to that, and this is meant to be more restrictive than the current IR zoning allows. So what we are presenting to you is in the whole PUD element as we understand this, is to be transparent with the exact plan that we are looking for. It is not an in-round or way to be able to do all that's required plus some. It is to say, this is the thing that we want to do.
Okay, so I appreciate that, but if you're saying, for example, the swimming pool, if somebody wants to add a swimming pool, they have to come back and ask for permission.
Cool.
So my question is, what's the difference between not asking for the swimming pool and if they want a swimming pool in the future, they come back and ask it to be added in? I think that you've listed all these different things that you're not going to do is very confusing.
So there's the language of this new district, just like the language of all of the other zoning districts. That we don't want to change that every single time. If in the future there's a desire, let's stick with the swimming pool.
Yeah.
There's the desire for the swimming pool. Currently, it's a use by right, and we could build a gigantic swimming pool up to the setbacks.
As an IR.
In the IR.
Like tomorrow.
We can build that with no P&Z or commissioner review.
Yes, but the PUD, you're asking for extra things and giving up certain things.
But you are getting the control. So here's how it changes. Currently, we can build a 114,000 square foot multifamily development.
Under the current zoning.
Yes.
Zero control. Under the PUD, because we're not showing multifamily, if we come back or some future person comes back and says, I want to build multifamily on this property, I want to max it out, the control that you have gained through this process is the ability to say no.
If the PUD is granted.
If the PUD is granted. So that's giving up a lot in regard to all of these uses. But we want to maintain them as uses within the district. The added aspect of a PUD is that PUD master plan that says, yes, there are however many uses permitted within the district, but this is the exact configuration of buildings and the site layout, the square footages, the density, the open space, et cetera. And that's a huge amount of control that the town is gaining through this process.
It really is not an end run. It is an attempt to say, here's exactly what we want to do. There's these other things that we could, as you said, we could go out tomorrow and build a pool. We could build a huge multifamily dwelling. But those are not things that the MRA has any desire to do. It is this, and so that's exactly what we're saying is we don't need all those other things listed. This is the thing we want. And if in 20 years somebody came back and said, we also want to add a swimming pool, they'd have to go through this process with that current group to do that. That's not what that's not what's in the plan.
So in essence, you're giving up full developability, IR, in exchange, to allow you to have those possibilities, but we would have control.
Yeah, and
It's an exchange.
And we're giving away 20%.
20% of buildable.
Let's say somebody wanted to build, we can build a single-family house. Somebody wants to build a really big,
Right.
14,000 square foot, single-family residence, which they can do. This PUD, at a minimum, limits that.
So you're limiting,
By
okay, so in
20%.
addition, you're limiting the amount
So
of
we're
buildable
limiting the
land.
density
Okay.
as one of the aspects of
As
this.
one of the,
And there's the
for tat,
plan
basically.
review process, which gives the town more control in lieu of what currently exists, which is no hotel, but a lot more flexibility in terms of the other uses that are allowed in the IR district.
The definition for a PUD is a planned unit development shall be a new zoning district that replaces the existing zoning district.
correct.
So that makes it sound like, forget what it is now, that all goes away. We're going to define specifically what this is.
Yes.
So if that's the case, why all these things that apply to IR are still, theoretically on the table? I mean, it just seems to me like we may all have an understanding between us in terms of what the intent is, what the plan is. But in the scenario where some other entity subsequently owns this property, they may not clearly understand that, and they may say, IR says we can build, family care homes or even a college or things like that.
And-
It just seems like it would be cleaner just to tightly define exactly what the game plan is and codify that.
Sure. I mean, again, just to note that tomorrow in the IR district, if we did nothing, if nothing changed about this, someone could currently do that. Someone could go do that right now in the current zoning space that it's in.
But we know you're not going to do that right now, so
Yeah, but
and I don't think that's a
No, right,
relevant argument.
but the PUD process says, if you change this to be a PUD,
Yes.
that means that whatever this mythical group is that might want to do that would have to come and do this before the town if they ever wanted to.
But you have to remember, as a body, we have to make a decision on, is this a legitimate use for now and in the future? And I think it's clear we're struggling with giving up, having that list in there in perpetuity when you're saying you don't need it, and we're saying that we're not sure how it will fit if you were to build a care home or other things. And the fact that you're saying, yes, we could do this, really doesn't enter into that conversation of whether we approve the PUD or not.
Yeah, go for it. Make sure you're clear.
I think it becomes, and this is in response to both
Yeah.
of these comments, to the east and to the west, we have IR district.
Mhm.
To MRA, to Altura, it makes the most sense for that zoning to be as contiguous as possible. We want that same zoning basically across that island that is that IR district block. If we were to have IR district, and then the PU district has no relation in terms of the uses, that's what we are discussing. But from our vantage point, we would like consistent IR district zoning, and that's why in my opening remarks, I listed the items where we're deviating, with reasons, we're deviating from the IR district, trying to adhere as much as possible so that we're maintaining that continuity across that contiguous district that was the IR district.
And again, just to make, sorry, go ahead, Richard.
I don't want somebody else who's about to make a point or ask a question, but I do have a comment when I get a chance. Is this now the time or you?
Yeah, go, comment now, please.
So, first of all, I just have a couple comments to make. Number one, I'm loving this discussion because it really brings into stark relief some of the ways in which we have been confused by the existing underlying code in the IR district. We have been consistently questioned in developing this property on questions of scale. We've been consistently questioned in this project on questions of design. We've been consistently questioned as a part of this project on questions of compatibility with the surrounding buildings in the neighborhood. For years, these questions have come up. For years, we've tried to approach these questions with candor about our rights and needs to use the property, as well as try to be sensitive to the needs of the neighborhood. Now, having said all of that, it has always confused us why, in the list of uses that you all are focusing on, there is no need for the community to question the use of scale for multifamily dwelling. According to the code, there's no use or no need to question the use of scale or compatibility or space needs for educational facilities or libraries or some of these other uses. So I just want to come back to the fact that, to me, the lack of clarity around these conversations, hopefully we will bring into relief with this conversation, which leads to my second point. To Bill's question about why wouldn't we remove these now while we have the chance? You can. And then we can decide whether those conditions are appropriate for us or whether that makes sense for us. But in addition to what I think was a fairly technical answer that Chuck gave you, I would give a principled answer. And the principle is this. we tried to base our application on the existing MZO to the extent possible. The existing MCO allows these uses. Now, we can, as Bill or Clay or someone pointed out, we can change it. That's true. But we were encouraged to pursue the PUD because we knew two things. One, it would have the same impact by limiting or eliminating these other potential uses for the property. And number two, it would avoid having to go back and sort of questioning the underlying existing code for the IR district anyway. And because we're founding this application on the fact that it does exist and is bordered by the IR district. So if somebody wanted to entertain a discussion about removing, say, for example, educational facility from the list so that we could never sell this to Montreat College and they could build a 114,000 square foot educational facility, do you want to remove a use by right? Do you want to impair the future value of the property in so doing? And that's certainly something our board would be willing to consider. But it opens up another can of worms about why we don't have a use by right for the property we're already using, for the purpose we're already using it for and have historically used it for. So I just think there's a principle underlying this application that goes beyond some of the technical answers I've heard.
And again, just to kind of reiterate, in principle, this gives more control to the town in terms of saying, in 10 years, somebody who wants to change that plan, or 20 years or whatever, the plan that you currently approve, whatever that plan is you approve, they have to come back through this whole process as opposed to just being able to go do it.
Fundamentally, the PUD, if it is approved, it applies to all of the buildings and land, including the existing buildings that are included in the whole parcel. And any substantial change would require an amendment to the PUD. So in effect, that list that is included in our application, because I guess it was asked for as part of the application, is totally subject to town control once the PUD is established. That's just worth it re-emphasizing.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think, Richard, I appreciate those comments, and I think that's a fair and clarifying response.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think for me, the part that's confusing is their permitted uses by right per the request, but they cannot be executed upon without amendment to the plan.
Right.
So it's confusing because it makes it look to a reader like me as if you can take that action, but you can't without modification to the plan. I wonder if some update to the plan clarifying that would be useful here. If that's the case, adding language that says, retain uses by right not depicted on the proposed plan. I mean, because I did not walk into this meeting thinking that the plan that's depicted on packet page 20 effectively did not permit those rights to be executed on unilaterally. That's my confusion.
Got it. Do you feel like you have clarity on that now? Or is that,
I have clarity on it now, but the other challenge that I see for this commission is this is our first PUD.
Yeah.
So a PUD that has a plan that also retains all existing rights. I'm not even going to look at Brandon on the question of precedent because we're not going to have that discussion. But it makes me uncomfortable to reflect all these retained rights in the first PUD and then have somebody else think, yeah, that makes sense for a PUD that I'm going to request that has a very broad applicability where I can retain all my existing zoning rights and add on a bunch of others. But I do very much appreciate all the points that you all have made that the plan that's depicted on 20 essentially overrules the unilateral ability to take action on those.
That's right.
It's just not very clear in the plan.
And we're not the only ones that'll read this. Everybody in the valley is going to read it.
Yeah.
And, the more that we can clarify for the general population and future uses, as Julie said, is important. And I think her suggestion of clarifying, saying that, you reserve the right to go back to this list per approval by P and Z or council,
Sure.
whoever.
Yeah.
But it would just be a lot more clear as to what you're planning on doing.
It would also make clear why you're asking for these retention of these rights, but you're not.
I appreciate the point about the first PUD. Our understanding was that that's implied in the PUD process in general, but I think, yeah, I mean, if,
Well, what if you,
Well-
after the listing of these, we are using it for this and this, the remaining ones would require coming back before the board, just a clarifying statement that explained that to an unknowing reader.
I mean, Richard, do you have a comment?
Well, I
about
was just going to say, I would be amenable to that kind of, to get that kind of language being added to the application, certainly. The other thing I just want to point out, though, is that, in effect, it isn't the plan that we're proposing that would limit our ability to do these other things. It's the existing law, as I understand it, and Brandon, I'd ask you to comment on this, but it's really the MZO and the conditions under which the PUD is granted that would limit our ability to come back. There's nothing in this application about coming back. It's really the MZO that is really provides the guardrails that limits our uses in the future. Is that a fair statement, Brandon? I'm not asking for legal advice. I'm asking for an opinion for the good of the order here.
Right, my understanding is that the site plan would govern what is allowed in this district that is being requested. And
Okay.
that state law and the MZO would require that any changes made to that site plan would have to be approved by this board in a new hearing, and that the board would not be bound by this decision in that hearing.
So
So
I guess following up on that point, then any language that we would add to the application would reinforce that state law would require any owner of the property to return to the town for an adjustment to the plan.
Yes, I believe that's accurate.
Can I add? What we've tried to do with this PUD is distill it down to the simplest. It's tied to the IR district. We've tried to do that with this language. On this topic of uses, and I also want to talk about Richard's point, but on the topic of uses, would you prefer to see the following? All uses in the IR district are permitted. Lodge hotel is permitted. Conference center is, is the problem that we're listing these, because what I've done in other municipalities, not Montreat, but different municipalities, is we do that. We say this new PUD district, it's in the high industrial. We say all high industrial uses are permitted. And then this use that we're adding is also permitted. And that's in the uses section. Would that help? Because I hear what you're saying, Mr. Hamilton. This wants to be super clear. And I think as the first PUD, there is that need for that absolute clarity. And when I see everything allowed in the IR district is a use that's allowed here, that makes sense to me. When I see this list, I say, whoa.
I think that the thing that shows the most specific of what you were doing is your site plan, right?
Correct.
Now, when you see a list of things, if on your site plan, you say we want to have all uses allowed in the district, and that means that one of these existing buildings that is shown on your site plan, if you wanted to use it for a museum, is that one of the listed things?
Yes.
Or an educational facility, then, I think that might be something that was allowable under this plan without coming back to this board, right? But when you see in that list something like a swimming pool, well, a swimming pool, I think, is probably something you would also expect to see on the site plan.
Right.
So I'm not sure that, the adoption of this site plan would give you the right to do a swimming pool just because it's listed as a use in the application. That would be further clarified, this is sort of beyond, at this point, we are at the recommendation phase for this board. That is something that would be clarified in detail in whatever ordinance is drafted to be considered by the governing board. But do we agree on that in principle? Does that make sense? Does that make sense to the commission?
What you're saying is that a museum you wouldn't see as a substantial change, but a swimming pool you would?
Well, I think it would depend, right? If the museum said we are going to fit squarely within the footprint and the height limitations and not add any additional parking, but we're going to be a museum, I think that the answer is, and I'm going to leave just room to hedge because I'm a lawyer, probably. I would ask, we've got a zoning administrator sitting here too. I'll give her a minute to think about that and give a response.
I would question, though, that the way it's written on it, it calls it a 24-room lodge. That would be my question to Brandon, if that is a substantial change going to a museum.
Yeah, and I think that is a good question. I think that right now we don't answer that definitively. So, it's one of those things, that's a determination that would be made by staff. It would be subject to, whatever discussions are involved there. But what is being considered by the board today is a planned unit development for a 24-unit lodge and other things that are shown on this site plan. So I think that's where the focus can be. I do think that the IR district thing is confusing. I'm not sure how helpful it is, to be completely honest. I understand that, it was included in the application to, try to be as complete as possible. But what you are doing is essentially creating a new zoning district.
Right.
Right? It's its own zoning district. It's its own thing that is based on, it is a site-specific development based on this plan.
Yeah, for me, it's like, I read the definition as I did before, a planned unit development shall be a new zoning district that replaces the existing zoning district. You then don't expect to turn the page and see that all the allowances under the IR zoning label are still allowed, even though this is a new, independent standalone zoning district. So that's what I think is confusing, if not contradictory to me. And you talked about not wanting to kind of carve this property out to have less rights than adjacent IR districts, but I also would, have concern that I need to think about. Does this then give encouragement to the owners of adjacent IR districts to essentially say, okay, well, let's just make our, if that's got all those rights as well, let's just become PUDs ourselves and do something comprehensive across 2 or 3 lots down, way in the future. I don't know. I just things to think about.
Sure. I'm trying to follow.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
That's an interesting comment, Bill. First of all, welcome to my world. I've been thinking about different ways, iterations, outcomes, for potentialities of this property and surrounding property for a long time, and you can drive yourself crazy coming up. What I've concluded is you can drive yourself crazy coming up with all the possible ways 10 or 15 years from now. Things might be different. 10 or 15 years from now, the town itself might be coming to the owner of this property and saying, we really would love to develop this for commercial use because we desperately need the tax revenue. 10 to 15 years from now, we might go to a parcel of property in the town and say we're desperate for an opportunity to develop a solar field, to take advantage of all the property. But there are a lot of different what ifs that really we can't even begin to comprehend. What the fundamental point of this PUD as it relates to the conversation we're having now is on the spectrum of more permitted uses and fewer permitted uses. The adoption of this PUD will severely limit the use of this property without town approval for the future. Absent some change in the way the town is governed, the town will have the authority to oversee, manage, protect neighbor interests and its own interests as different options for this property are considered.
I think we understand that now. I think the question is whether the paper that will be the record sufficiently reflects that. I think that's the question that we're bringing up. Any other questions on that same topic so that we can move on to?
This, I believe that, I think I do understand. It sounds like the parties or the applicant and this commission have an understanding of what the request actually is.
Yes.
And I have confidence that staff can draft something that captures that. It will obviously be subject to review and approval of this commission, but I think that we understand what the request is regardless of any confusion in the application, and I think we could draft language that reflects that in the recommendation. Now, obviously, we are early in this process, and there's still a lot to be heard and a lot to be said, but I think that we can move on from that point.
On this, I have one question. On the existing buildings, is it my understanding, and I'm not opposed to it, I'm just trying to understand, if the building deteriorates or needs substantially upgraded or something, as long as they're basically within the footprint, they don't need to come back to the P&Z. Is that correct?
We're speaking in big, broad generalities, but I would say that is broadly correct, yes.
Okay, but if they were to expand it, move it, something, then they would come back to the P&Z?
Again, generally, yes.
Or, if I can add, Brandon, just to clarify, correct me if I'm wrong, or if we were to substantially change its use.
Could you get a little closer? Thank you. Yeah, make sure it's, I don't think it's on. Yeah, just, there we go.
Coming back to the swimming pool, right now, you can go build a swimming pool if you want to tomorrow.
Correct.
Correct.
If we approve this PUD, you're going to have to come back to see us if you want to build that same swimming pool.
That's correct.
And so the trade-off is we are giving you some more lenient restrictions on the buildings that you're going to put into this property. Bottom line, that's the deal.
Yeah, I mean.
Bottom line, that's correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I had one more question on the site plan. In it, you said that there would be 20% a minimum of open space.
Correct.
And I'm curious, could you just hold it? On this plan,
Page 20.
what's the percentage open space that you have on this plan? Because it looks like it's more than 20%.
Oh, it's more than 20%.
So why are you limiting yourself to 20%?
Well, that's a minimum.
Yeah,
We're providing more.
okay. And if you were, again, if you were to expand the buildings and you would have to come back and ask for
That
permission.
is
That's
correct.
correct.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Would you talk a little bit about, I see on the right side of the plan on packet page 20, there's a boundary buffer. You talked about the louvers, you talked about the visibility from Georgia Terrace. So could you just talk about what the neighbors are going to see and how that's different from what they see right now?
So our understanding from the MZO is that a fence, and I believe you said a 6-foot fence would meet the MZO. So that's how we would meet it. What this PUD is saying is we're going to do a vegetated buffer there that complies with the MZO and is more than a fence.
Can you, I do understand what vegetative buffer is, but I mean, can you give us an example of what that could be? Like fir trees or bushes or?
It would be a combination of shrubs and trees.
And then what about on the west, along Georgia Terrace? What's up there now and what's going to change? There's not a depiction of anything. I guess it's because the road is there?
On the west side? Go ahead, Richard.
Sure. To the important thing to remember as it relates to the two cottages in Georgia Terrace is that they will be in compliance with the setback. Both of the buildings that were there previously, Lord Apartments and Chestnut especially was built well into the setback. I think Lord encroached into the setback by a few feet. These buildings will be set off not just from Georgia Terrace, but set off from the right of way that comes between those two buildings and Georgia Terrace. There is substantial vegetation within that right of way that we hope to be able to sustain as part of the project. So we do not feel there's quite the same need. Furthermore, I mentioned earlier that we based the plan in part on some of the input from neighbors. Some of the, and I don't want to speak for neighbors in this hearing and end up misstating, but our understanding that a goal from the neighbors was that the architecture was the most important thing facing Georgia Terrace, and that architecture be of residential in nature. And we feel like we're doing a good job with respect to buffering those areas by providing the kind of architecture that neighbors on Georgia Terrace have consistently told us over the last several years they prefer to a lodge or institutional building.
Right, it makes sense to me that the smaller footprint and the more home-like, residential home-like view is preferable. But you touched on the trees that are up there in the right-of-way, so your expectation is that in fact, I think you might be required to protect those as...
The tree island?
Yes.
There, so to speak.
Yep. So as part of, I think the section might be landscaping compliance, but there's a requirement that you will need to do something to protect those. Have you contracted with an arborist? Has there been any investigation in what's required?
We're working with a civil engineer and a landscape architect because if you're talking about the preservation of vegetation, the ordinance is very clear that where you have buildings, sidewalks, driveways, and stormwater drainage, the saving of those trees is not a requirement in the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance says what's the language? I don't want to misstate the ordinance.
But this is the right-of-way, which is
we're in the right-of-way, and we're required to follow the ordinance in regard to protection of those trees.
Okay.
We do have a tree protection ordinance.
Correct.
So anything in the town right-of-way or on public property does require review by the tree board.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And back to what this PUD master plan does, in regard to buffering, you'll remember that in the development standards, so there's been a lot of talk about the plan. With the PUD, both the development standards and the plan work together. Mm-hmm. Those development standards spell out the landscaping screening requirements. What we're showing here is where we're going above and beyond what the zoning ordinance requires, and that's what we're showing.
Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, your statement says, it mentions that all development of public and private property shall make every effort to protect and retain existing trees, shrubbery, vines, and grasses.
Correct.
So I would assume that includes things that are not in the public right-of-way, but that are not where your building is.
That's correct.
And have y'all identified the trees or shrubs that would be protected
So,
in this instance?
For an example, the open space in between the cottage and Hickory is listed as Building 6. We are dedicating that as open space, and we are going to save as many of those trees as possible. However, we also have the requirement through the PUD to have an accessible route that connects Georgia Terrace down to our auto court. We need internal circulation as part of the PUD. That's an extra that we're required. Putting in those sidewalks may affect the trees. We will be adhering to the tree requirements. Mm-hmm.
So section 904 for the existing flora.
Could you check and see if your mic is on?
Should be. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just not close enough. All developers of public and private property shall make every effort to protect and retain existing trees, shrubbery, vines, and grasses not actually lying in public roadways, drainage ways, building foundation sites, public driveways, paths, and public walkways wherever possible. Trees are to be protected and preserved during construction in accordance with sound conservation practices. All such trees may be preserved by well islands or retaining walls wherever abutting grades are altered.
Thank you.
Do y'all have a landscaping plan done yet?
That is in process. We do have a stormwater plan that's included.
Okay, and especially the buffer between the project and the Hayner's house. Is there a minimum size tree? I mean, I don't want to see y'all come in and put in little teeny trees that will take 20 years to grow to the height.
I think there we would default back